Hey guys, what is up? My name is Addie. You can still do your year review. I think it's totally fine to review your year even a couple months into the new year. Like, it's not a bad thing to have self-reflection and to get clear on what you want and what direction you're going in and who you are. I was planning to film this video, and I actually did film it one time before, but it just was not good enough for me. So welcome to my year review strategy and just my own personal experiences, things that I've compiled over the years, over the past 5 or 6 years, that have helped me make a year review system that has helped me to become more self-aware and get more focused and have more direction about my life and know myself so much more personally, gaining clarity about what I want out of my life and giving me the mental health lessons and just the life lessons that were being thrown at me throughout the year. But going back and reviewing your past year is an amazing way to get more in touch with yourself, with your goals and dreams, and it has truly helped me so much. More of a prepping tip, but I think it's super important to find a space where you feel comfortable and where you feel like you can just think and be yourself and journal, and you're not going to be overly interrupted, and you're going to feel at peace doing your year review process. Now, my year review process for me does take like multiple days, and so I'll kind of like switch up where I am, and honestly just doing anything is better than doing nothing. But I do believe in having like a place that you can go and think, whether it's like a good reading chair or your couch or whatever, is so helpful to get into the mindset, especially if you're not used to doing a lot of journaling, reflection, which you can do this in like a very simple way or in a very like journaly way. You can totally use it whichever way is best for you. But if you're not really used to journaling and like self-reflecting a lot, which I know I used to not be that way much at all, but then I've become that way a lot over the last few years. And so now I'm used to it, but you know, it can be kind of overwhelming in the beginning. That's really why I want to give you guys these tips and tricks that I've learned about doing a year review process, so that way you can shortcut all of the planning and like strategizing and finding different resources that work for you, and hopefully you can pick and choose which ones are going to be best for you out of what I have to share with you today. So I'm super excited to jump on in. A huge reason why I think it's important to do a year review process is so that way you learn the lessons that life is trying to show you, and you don't recreate the same situations in your life year after year after year. I know that I used to live in a more negative, toxic headspace, and I would repeat that process year after year, and there wasn't a lot of growth and healing. And I learned that through having self-awareness and self-compassion, that is what allows you to grow and go into that next chapter of life and have mental clarity and have clarity on what your goals and dreams are, which is so important. It's so important to know what your dreams are more than anything, in my opinion, because that's what's going to give you the most fulfillment in life and just for you to know who you are. Also, in my own experience, I think doing your review is so good for you in order to plan the next year, because it's so hard to know where you want to go if you don't even know where you've been. And just knowing, hey, these are the things that I went through this last year, these are the adjustments I want to make, these are my patterns, this is why this happened and why it didn't, and so forth, really helps you effectively plan the next year and know what you want out of the next year first and foremost, but also know what your hiccups usually are and know how to work with yourself and take the lessons out of the year as they present themselves to you. And so it's really helped me to just have a good reflection on where I've been, so that way I can know where I need to go from here. I also just wanted to say that if you're not a big journaler, do not sweat. You can absolutely use the lessons and points that I use in here in whatever way you see fit. I know sometimes going on a long walk and just reflecting and meditating on what I've recently learned helps gain a lot of clarity for me, or even just doing mirror therapy and talking to yourself in the mirror with the questions that I'll give you as prompts, or write a quick note in your phone just something to keep track, because I know that when you write something down, you're more likely to remember it. For me, I think it makes you so much more aware of your thoughts. But again, you can ease yourself into it for sure. Don't get too overwhelmed, because I know in the beginning I was super overwhelmed when I learned about year reviews, because I actually learned the idea initially from John Maxwell, and he does like a year review starting in November around Thanksgiving, and he'll literally go through his planner like hour by hour. And I was like, whoa, that's so much. I cannot do that right now. So I kind of like built on my process as I went along. But I think just number one, the fact of doing it and going through every single month, and I'll give you tips on how, but that is so good, even if it's not much, even if it's just like, what's one thing I learned this month? So, do not get overwhelmed, and if you do, just know that's totally normal, because I actually still get kind of overwhelmed when doing my year review, just because like it's kind of a lengthy process and I really take the time and space to do it. And it's also just such an emotional thing. Like, you're literally sitting there with yourself in the feelings, in the experiences that you went through this last year, and it's learning how to have compassion for yourself on the hard times, and how to like be real with yourself and honest with yourself, which I feel like is the hardest thing sometimes. So it definitely is an emotional process. It's a time process, but it's such a healing process, and it's so good and so worth it. So I would just encourage you guys to keep watching. All right, so number one, I usually have picked out a word for the year, and that is kind of my focal point, my guiding light. And I usually forget about it during the year, but when I do my year review, I can actually look back and see how my life expanded, and it would surprise you how much is going on behind the scenes, and how much the universe and God is working to bring about the fruition of whatever you think on and whatever you decide to think on, which I think is a decision of a focus. And so my word for 2020 was vision. And I know that's kind of cliche, like 2020 vision. I heard that. But I actually felt like I needed a lot more vision and direction in my life. So I was like, it's okay if it's cliche, like this is what I need in my life right now. And so initially I started like reading some books on vision, like visioneering and stuff like that. But it is absolutely incredible to see how your life changes over 12 months. If you do already choose a word for the year, then just take that as a point of reflection to figure out, okay, my word was this. How did my life change or expand in that area, or like surprise me? Like, I know 2020 was very surprising for me in terms of vision. Like, it totally took me and shook me and made my vision so much more clear and way different than I ever thought it would be at this point in my life, which ended up being a really good thing. But I was not expecting that at all. Like, it really helped me recenter myself and know who I am and what I really truly want, and my desires and my creative nature, and just like everything about myself. Like, it was crazy how much it helped me regroup and reground because of the quarantines, having the time by myself, going through the fears, going through the uncertainties, but also being able to refocus and get so much more vision than ever. So if you already do the word for the year, I would definitely keep reflecting on that word as you go through these year review steps. Before I even get out any reflection material, like my planner, my notebooks, anything like that, go through any pictures, I actually like to get out just a blank piece of paper before I start anything and just write out what my impression was of the last year, because it's so interesting to see what you thought about the last year before you actually dove in and saw what was going on that year. Writing down your impression to see if it's even like accurate, or if you're being like grateful enough for what happened in your last year, or if you're totally forgetting something or whatnot, and just seeing what your general impression is really fun. So I would recommend doing that. Grab a notebook to write down all of your discoveries. So I just grab like a random notebook, like this is my one right now that I spilled boba tea on, so it's not very pretty, but I just write down, like I kind of section out a page for each month, so that way I can write down any reflections I had. So I have a couple tools that really help me track my year, And everyone's different. You know, I will preface by saying that because I'm definitely more of a planner than like a live in the moment type of person. But I still think being organized with your time is so important because you can never get your time back. So one amazing tool that I use is actually the Law of Attraction Planner. This is my planner right here. It's also known as the Freedom Mastery Planner, and it's my absolute fave because it actually gives you the hour or half an hour time slots. It has some incredible reflection tools like monthly reflection. It talks about law of attraction in the beginning. It helps you plan out not only just like the next year or even 20 years, but your whole life, which is really cool. That has really stretched and expanded my dream so much just by using this planner. And this is not sponsored or anything. I just absolutely love the planner. And one thing I really love especially is that it helps you track your vibrational state. So if you're feeling, you know, depressed or angry or hopeful or blissful or loving, you know, it helps you track whatever your vibration is. And then it gives you the tools to do that. And then at the end of the month, it actually asks you a prompt question in the monthly review of how is your vibration this month? What did you do to improve it, and so forth. So one thing I do is I grab my Law of Attraction planner and I start going through month by month. So I will get out my Law of Attraction planner, just like read over what I was doing that month, and I'll take notes the whole time. So if I had anything really stand out to me, I will note like, oh, I was feeling this way, or these events happened which made me feel this way. I also pay attention to who I'm hanging out with, which I'll get into a little bit later, but just like basically where I'm spending my time and energy. Pull out any journals that you might have, any material where you like got more in depth on what you were going through, how you were feeling, what was going on in your life, or what you were tracking. Like a huge tool for me I like to use is my bullet journal because it's so good for tracking and just writing down your hodgepodge kind of life things. And I don't necessarily read all my to-do lists or anything. I just read through kind of what was going on within me internally for reflection purposes and kind of in general what was going on in my life. And I just grab those journals so that way they're right there and I can read through them at the same time. So that's going to be a really helpful tool as well. And if you're not a big journaler, is there any notes on your phone or just anything that you can pull out for each month that's going to give you something as a tool to reflect on? So in my journal, I will write down any themes or reoccurring feelings or life lessons that keep coming up over and over again. And I'll actually make it a point to, on a separate piece of paper, I'll write down the questions that I had in my mind that were going through my mind at the time. So like if I was having self-doubt or just anything that isn't in alignment with who I truly am, I'll write down that question for later to reflect on for this year. And I'll be like, hey, do I still struggle with this self-doubt in this area? Or do I still feel unsafe in this situation or whatnot? And I'll just kind of go through and see specifically what that month was trying to teach me. That's my whole goal of writing down what was going on in a month, because I want to notice the themes and I want to ultimately notice what that month was in my life for and what it was teaching me and growing me through. The next step I like to do is to actually go through the pictures on my phone. There's something that's so different from looking at your like planner and your journal than to actually looking at pictures of yourself and like staring into your own eyes and being like, hey, how you doing? That is just a totally different reflection tool. And so I love going through my pictures next. And you don't have to do these like in any certain order, but I just go through my pictures and write any notes that I have about what was going on within me or within my life that month. And looking at the images helps you remember so much. And so that's a really helpful tool because I don't know about you, but I constantly screenshot things. And so even just like seeing what you screenshotted, you're like, oh, I was really drawn to that for some reason. And you can kind of reflect and figure out why. This is probably the most important one because this is what affects your life in the long term and affects every single thing about you. and that is your association. So one really important tip that I like to reflect on as I'm going through my year is I like to take note of who I was spending time with and how they were making me feel. So that way you can pick and choose your association and the people that are going to bring out the best in you, because that is going to determine every single thing in your life. Next one is to realize what your ego was saying and what your soul was saying. So when I say that, your ego is going to be the side of yourself that is self-seeking, self-centered, egotistical, so forth. You can look up more about it, but anytime where you were feeling like comparison or guilt or shame or anything negative, like what was your ego saying, or even ways your ego was holding you back, like why didn't you take that opportunity, or what was your ego pointing out to you about unhealed parts of yourself? And then also, what was your soul saying, your intuition? If you believe in spirituality, what was God telling you? And were you really listening to those things and getting real with yourself? Like, I know that can be really hard and scary, but it's honestly so good when you have a breakthrough of honesty. Hey, like my intuition was saying this, but like for some reason my desire and my ego was stronger and it pulled me toward this. Why did that happen? And just reflecting on that for your life choices is so good. I just love writing down any quotes or anything that really spoke to me in the year. So I love quotes, like they are so good. I think I have a couple right here. Fear is an insult to life, a distrust in its power and care, a turning away from its love, beauty, and abundance. That is so good, like so fitting for 2020 with all of the uncertainty. And then the biggest lie we are taught is that everything isn't connected. That's huge. And then I also love this one. Your heart knows the way, run in that direction. So just like some major points that stood out to you. And like, I don't know if you guys keep quotes or you screenshot quotes all the time like I do, but keep track of those because those can actually be huge sources of motivation for the next year. As you're going through and reflecting on your past year, a really good helpful thing that's helped me overcome a lot of my shyness or insecurity is going through and figuring out what were my regrets in the last year. And that is such a potent question because I don't know about you, but I love making a bucket list. Like I love bucket lists. And when I go back and look and I'm like, oh gosh, like I didn't do these things or I didn't do enough of what I wanted to do. I didn't make time for this thing I'm really passionate about. Going through and realizing what's really important to you and honing in on that is so good for your soul and helps you listen to your intuition more. Go through, be kind to yourself as always. Please don't be harsh on yourself. Do not be a militant leader to yourself. I have done that for years and it just never brought any fruitfulness in my life. Approaching yourself with compassion and caring and understanding is so good. And so if there's something in your life that you did not get done or that you regret not doing, then have compassion for yourself, realize why it didn't happen, and just move into the next year with your new renewed bucket list. So it's so good and important to have something to look forward to in life. And so I think even just like those little things or big things along the way really helps motivate you and have stuff to look forward to do and have and become. And so that's why I love the whole bucket list idea, but that is going to be a really helpful tool. Simultaneously, as I'm going through all this stuff, I also make notes of what I want to incorporate, change, or include in 2021, which I'll get more into that in my year planning video, but making those little notes of what you want to change because of what you're reflecting on is also just a really good point because you can actually use those things in planning your next year, and they're succinct, they're right there, they're fresh on your brain, and then you just can't steer away from what you actually want to do. Next point is to go back through all of your notes. Hopefully you have like at least a page of notes for each month, and I like to take a black pen at the top of the page and write down what I think the major lesson was in my life for that month. And I go through that for every month. I write down what I think the major lesson was, and you guys, it is so life-changing. That becomes my mental health guide for the next year, honestly, because I realize the lessons that are right there for me, or learning about myself and, oh, I'm really drawn to this, or I need to do more of this. And that kind of becomes like my guidebook for myself for my next year. So that is going to be so good for your guys' souls. I'm so excited for that. One thing that I really love to do as I'm going through and reflecting is to write down what my affirmations are for the next year. So anything that I wrote down the last year or that really encouraged me in the last year, or I'm a big affirmations user, so any affirmations that I used in the last year that really stood out to me, I love to write them down. But you guys, if there's an area that you're struggling in, or if there's an area where you still feel like you're healing and growing, write an affirmation for that. That is honestly what got me outside my comfort zone so much, because like I'm naturally so introverted, and so writing out, I love people and I naturally attract friends, was so outside my comfort zone at first and did not seem real at all. But you guys, it works so well because you don't believe it at first, and then you start being like, no, this is who I am. And it's not about changing who you are, it's about maturity and embracing more aspects of yourself, developing who you are and expanding who you are, and not being confined to your personality. And so, because everyone needs social interaction, like just in that example, you know, I'm introverted, but everyone still needs social interaction. So writing out your affirmations for the next year is so good. I cannot even tell you. And then you have a condensed list right there that you can write down in your next planner or in a notebook, or put it on your wall so it's right there and you can read it every morning. Journal prompt really helped me change my life and get rid of a lot of my anxiety this last year, because I learned that anxiety, and while it's different for everyone, but just in my own experience, it comes from some type of attachment that you have. So one really amazing prompt that I do is I reflect, what were my attachments last year and what are my attachments now? Because whatever you're attached to, whether it's your opinion your mom has about you, or your opinion your friends have about you, or maybe it's how you look or how you dress or how much money you have, those are all material, physical attachments, and your worth is so intrinsic, and your being is so much more than this physical reality. And what I believe, that you are an amazing essence that does not need to be tied down by worries about this world. It is important to have your needs met. I'm not saying to not be ambitious, but when it's an attachment and you feel controlled by that thing, that's where it's getting unhealthy. And so reflecting on your attachments last year is so good, because then you can reflect and be like, oh, maybe I have some of those same attachments, or maybe I let go of some attachments and I'm so proud of myself. It's just such a healthy thing to do. One thing I really love to do is just really take time to sit down with my notes and celebrate my accomplishments from the last year. From really little things like, oh my gosh, I worked out 3 times that week, to big things like I got a new job. Really celebrate the time and energy that you put into last year and what those accomplishments were for you. Write down a list of your joys from last year. I think especially when we have a tough year like 2020, counting your blessings and going through and seeing what brought you real joy, the people, the places, events, or food, or art, or I always love going through, and you can either write them down, like appreciate them in your heart, but I think writing them down helps, and just notice the places and the things that happened that gave you real joy, because that's going to actually give you kind of like a guideline or a map. And then you can schedule those into your life. So that's going to be something that helps you be more in touch with yourself as the years go by, because you'll be spending time with people in places that really remind you of who you are and ground you and make you feel joyful and happy, and just like the enlightened, beautiful being that you are. So that is a huge tip that has changed my life and just given me a lot of joy. Lastly, and I really can't stress this enough, but just approach each month and each moment and season of your life with total gratitude. If there were hard lessons in this last year, which I know there were for many of us, approach it with gratitude and say thank you for the lesson that you taught me in that. And that way you leave the last year healed, refreshed, you're ready for a new start, you're not carrying in the baggage of the last year, and you're really showing yourself compassion and love, which is so important because you deserve it, you're worthy of that, and you deserve to have a healthy year. So I'm so excited for you guys. I hope this has helped you so much, and if it has, please leave a comment, give it a like, and subscribe, and let me know what you learned in the last year. So I love you guys so much, and I hope you guys have an amazing night.